This week on Dig Me Out. With your hosts, Jason Ziak and Tim Minichi.
Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. And Jay, it is that union, which I just spoke of seconds ago, who are responsible for this episode. They are the ones who voted in this poll episode.
That's who we get to blame.
Well, that's an ominous start. Well, okay.
I kid.
So we had a poll. This was our April poll. 9 albums entered into this poll. The Thunderdome.
Right. Yes.
We don't need another hero, Jay. We need another album to review. And we got a whole bunch, and it was really close. This was a back and forth between two records, essentially. And I'm surprised the way it shook out. I'm surprised that a lot of the other stuff, it didn't even get close to these two records. So here's what we had. Eric Peterson suggested Marvin the Album by Frente. I think that's how you say it. Or Frente, because there's an exclamation point at the end. Jeremy Amen suggested RTFM by Poster Children. Willie Dillon suggested Dead Air by Heat Miser. Kevin Kahn suggested Let Me Come Over by Buffalo Tom. Vadim Taver suggested Lush Life by Bowery Electric. Bowery. Jay Slugga suggested This Euphoria by David Garza. I know it's not David, it's David, because I remember David Garza.
Do you remember getting corrected on that?
Mm-hmm. Patrick Carter suggested Edge of Thorns by Savage. Jason K suggested Melinda, Everything Was Beautiful and Nothing Hurt by Lifter. And Bryce suggested For Your Own Special Sweetheart by Jawbox. Now, if you were a betting person, as we will be soon when we line up all of our polls with the sports betting app, you might have had money on a number of these because there's a lot of good choices in this poll. There's no like clear popular record, and there's no like, I don't feel like there's a single one in here that I didn't know in terms of the name of the band. Probably listened to the album at some point. I think maybe Lifter was the only one that I hadn't listened to it, but I've heard Frente, Poster Children, Heat Miser, Buffalo Tom, Bowery Electric, David Garza, Sabotage. How do you say it?
It's are you seriously don't know?
I don't know how to say. No, I don't.
Okay, so I have to tell this story now. It is Sabotage.
It is.
But
okay.
As a kid, I thought it was Sabotage. And our friend Keith just ragged on me endlessly because I said Sabotage. And he's like, what did you say? I was like, that band Sabotage. He's like, it's Sabotage, idiot. So you made the same mistake I made.
Sabotage. I feel like there needs to be an accent in there somewhere.
Tim, you make me feel not so stupid.
Okay. Well, that's my goal in life, is to make other people feel less stupid by elevating my stupidity. I mentioned I'm not really familiar with Lifter, but Jawbox, I own that record. I've listened to it a ton of times. So
really, we did Heat Miser and Bowery Electric already, right?
And we've talked about Poster Children in our 2000s episode.
Yep.
And we've talked to Jay Robbins from Jawbox. So how did it shake down?
Win. I thought Jawbox was going to win.
Yeah. I thought it was either Jawbox or Buffalo Tom. There's a lot of Buffalo Tom love, especially for that record. Nope.
Yes.
Nope. Nope. Buffalo Tom came in second with 24% of the vote. Jawbox came in with 12% of the vote, tied for third place with Lifter. The winner, Marvin the Album by Frente. Heat Miser got 3%. David Garza got 6%. Bowery Electric got 9%. Sabotage got 0. Maybe because of the pronunciation. I don't know. I was shocked. I couldn't even remember what Frente sounded like when I saw that it won. I was like, what does that band sound like? What? I don't even remember. Like, I know the name. That's a very like memorable name. Didn't know. So here's what Eric said. He said, cute indie pop from Australia. I caught their single in 120 minutes and picked up the album. They sit comfortably on that line between novelty and alternative rock. And if we get a few more ears on this record, that is a win. I would not have expected Eric Peterson to suggest this record.
I wouldn't have either, but we do need to know. Eric's picks won both the 80s metal podcast that we just did for King's X and this. Dude is a superstar.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, King's X Gretchen was Eric's pick.
Eric's just rolling in the picks. So
hats off to you, man.
Well, again, we need to start tracking things and figuring out who's actually got the most picks and that have won.
I know. Man,
that sounds like work. I don't know if I want to do that. I already have a job that makes me do
no work going on over here. you realize we released three 1.5 hour long podcasts this week.
That seems like a lot. Is that a lot?
I think so. Most of the podcasts I listen to struggle to get out like once every 2 weeks.
Maybe we should space it out a little bit. Maybe we are overdoing it. Maybe we're saturating our own market. I don't know. Maybe we should release a survey monkey on that. Are we saturating our market? Who knows? I don't know. The people don't complain. I don't know if they are behind the scenes like, God, these guys put out too much crap. They're like Guided by Voices and Robert Pollard. Like, I only need 1 album a year. I don't need 3. Just make it. Maybe what we need to do, Jays, is combine them all into 1 episode, like a super episode, instead of actually doing 3 episodes.
How does that make less work?
I don't know. Still have to listen to 3 records. Here are some of the comments. Maybe we can figure out like how this happened. Jim Lazowski said, forgot all about Frente, but man, Taillights Fade by Buffalo Tom is a perfect song, and that's their best record. Not to mention Jawbox. This is too hard. I agree with you, Jim. Andrew O.C. Holy cow, For Your Own Special Sweetheart hasn't been dug out yet? That's a Travis Shamockery. That's a new word. Jerry Men, poor poster children. Jawbox is going to run away with this. Nope.
Don't think so.
Bill Hampton said he loves Savage Gutter Ballet, but is going with Buffalo Tom. Joe Royland said there's some good competition here, but it's far and away Buffalo Tom for me. Ugh, I wish I could vote for, Willie Dillon said, I wish I could vote for Poster Children, Heat Miser Lifter, and Jawbox. What a stacked poll. Adam Rogan, I also heard David Garza from that Best Buy commercial. Kinder is a great song. I will need to revisit the rest of that album. Richard Waterman, I'm going with Poster Children. This is my favorite album from them. Wendy Bueller voted for David Garza because it's one of those albums that I bought when it came out. I listened to it a few times, thought it was good, and then slipped back on the shelf and forgot about it for decades. Jeremy Amend, looks like support for Frente is quiet here. Might be another silent but deadly voting block. Darren Leach said, I lived in Australia the time this came out. Accidentally Kelly Street was everywhere. It was annoying then and still is today. YouTube accidentally was released where the sketch show The Late Show take the piss out of the track. It's a huge no from me. To which Jeremy responded, I just heard that song for the first time now. I can see how that would be especially annoying for us angsty teens, young adults in 94. However, I love the other singles from this band around that time, I think. And Vadim Tabor at the end said, Frente won? Definitely didn't see that one coming, especially with the other choices. Vadim, we're right there with you. Also, I think one person expressed their appreciation for Frente in the comments. So all the Frente votes did not get backed up with comments, which is an interesting
that seems to happen
phenomenon.
A lot.
I don't understand. I feel like sometimes people like, that's the album that's the weirdest out of these. I'm going to vote for that just to see how it pushes Tim and Jay's buttons.
Sometimes you wonder if like somehow the ballots were stuffed.
I don't know how it happens, but Jay, had you ever heard of or heard any Frente music before this?
I'm familiar with the name.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I heard them, but I had some notion of what they might sound like. How about you?
Similar. Heard the name. I remember that someone I was friends with in college liked them and like referred to them in conversation, but I never actually checked out. I don't know if they were like, you should listen to this album. And I was like, sure, I will. And then I never did. Or if we just came up, you know, talking about music or whatever, but I don't remember ever listening to them. So everything on here was a complete like surprise in terms of I've
Hmm.
never listened to one moment of Frente. So it was mentioned in the comments. Let's get into a little bit of the history of the band of Frente. They were formed in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia in 1989. The key members that you want to know are Simon Austin and Angie Hart. Simon on guitar and backing vocals, Angie Hart on lead vocals. Tim O'Connor was on bass. He was later replaced by Bill McDonald. And Mark Piketon on drums. He was later replaced by Alistair Barden and then Peter Loosecombe. They first album when a first release was in August 91. It was an EP called World, not world as in the world, but WHIRLED. Then they released in March of 1992 the EP Clunk. That actually charted went to number 3 in Australia, and it went gold. So that was on the Mushroom label, which is a fairly big label in Australia. They've released quite a lot of stuff, and that's where Marvin the album was released later that year, November 24th of 1992. So here's the thing, Jay. It went to number 5 in Australia, number 4 in New Zealand, went to number 75 on the US 200 album chart, number 1 on the US Heat Seekers chart.
What?
Yes. So that was like the new new and developing artists. So it wasn't something that like an established artist could even chart on that. It was like brand new artists, people just coming up. No recollection of that. None. But again, 1992, I wasn't in college radio at that point. I was still in, fall of 92, I was just entering college. So I wasn't even paying attention to what the hell was going on with the Heat Seekers chart in fall of 92.
Yeah,
I was an awkward freshman at Bowling Green trying to, get acclimated.
You were a heat seeker.
Yeah. Well, I was seeking a D average that first semester is what I was seeking, and I got it.
A lukewarm seeker.
Yeah, I was struggling academically, as they say. I might need to rethink my future, as the guidance counselor might have said.
Really?
The trades might be your. No, I no disrespect to the trades. I just I didn't do well my first semester of college, or my third, or my fifth. I had trouble with fall semesters. Let's just put it that way. It took me a while. After you're out of school for a while,
you were distracted. You come back to school, you were partying so much, right?
It wasn't so much the partying.
I'm joking. I know you weren't partying either.
It wasn't until later. But I wasn't even heavy partying or anything. It was just looking back on it now, I probably had a learning disorder.
Yeah.
That's what Katie keeps telling me, my wife, when I tell her about things in grade school and high school, and she's like, "You had a learning disorder." I was like,
"Yeah,
me have no learning disorder. Me learn fine." So okay, enough self-deprecating humor here. Let's move on. They released their second album, Shape, in July of 1996. That went to number 35 in Australia and number 109 in the UK. It did not chart in the US or New Zealand. They did put out a couple more EPs, Labor of Love in 1993, Lonely in 1994. I believe those were just, expanded versions of singles for the Marvin album. They did release, again, a number of singles Uh, here's the interesting thing. Now, this might be the way that you actually and I know Frente. So the Marvin the album, as he said, it actually did okay in the US. None of the singles actually charted in the US. They charted in the UK, but then when they put out the Lonely EP, they included a cover of a New Order song, Bizarre Love Triangle.
Right.
That charted. That went to number 49 on the US chart. Like, I'm not talking
Hmm.
about alternative chart, heat seeker. I mean, 49 on the US chart, number 10 on the US alternative chart. If you were to play that version of Bizarre Love Triangle, you might recognize it. It's this very twee,
Yeah,
you know,
I've listened to the remastered version of the record, which is like a
same.
double album that it contains that. So
So
yeah, I guess I might have heard it.
that's the thing I remember hearing when I heard that on the remastered version that you're mentioning. I went, oh, I remember that. Somebody put that on a mix, and I
Hmm.
listened to it, and then it was on a mix CD that I lost whatever millions of years ago. So um that's like their big in terms of acknowledgement in the United States. That's the big thing. That's how their people know them. For the most part, they were pretty much done at that point. Well, not done, but they by 1998 they were done. They got back together in 2004 um, to do a couple of new recordings. Um, Actually, Austin and Hart had both moved to the United States at that point, and they would do acoustic shows. They did some Australian shows, and then went along and did their other stuff after that. Didn't do anything from 2005 until 2010. Then they got together doing some more stuff. 2014, they announced, okay, we're officially going to do a Frente tour. Going to do some shows in Australia to celebrate the 21st anniversary of Marvin the album. And then in 2023, they did some 30th anniversary shows with a full band. And again, this was in Australia. And then Mushroom record label turned 50 and on the same year. So they did a 50th anniversary show for Mushroom in November of 2023, just last year. So something that I want to mention because it was brought up in the comments, the show The Late Show, which is an Australian sketch comedy show, was on ABC in Australia for 2 years, 92, 93. And the song Accidentally Kelly Street, which is misspelled on purpose,
Yeah.
they parodied that. And so you got to keep in mind, this is a young band. I think Angie Hart was like 19 or 20 when this happened. And they
Mm.
like really went after them, like in a way that they thought was like incredibly mean. And she was like, why are they being so mean? It's just a stupid pop song. Like, but
Yeah.
it had garnered a lot of attention. It was getting played in Australia. But these sketch comedy people were like, we're going to destroy this band.
Hmm.
And they did. And I guess it like messed her up for a little while. Like, does everybody hate me? Like it really like
Yeah.
dug into her. Um, that's messed up.
Mm.
So I wonder if that had something to do with them, kind of breaking up pretty quickly after the next record. But they did get some songs on some soundtracks. Like one of their songs was included on My So Called Life, the Gen
That makes
X
sense.
show of the 90s. And they were also on the Ricky Gervais shows. The Ricky Gervais show. Um, because Stephen Merchant picked Bizarre Love Triangle for that. And then they were also on Melrose Place, on the soundtrack for Melrose Place. So they got some placement. That's definitely had the record label working for them. But let's get into the record, Jay. Since you and I are completely, unfamiliar with the record. This might be, I know there's times when we're both like, we don't know this record, but Uh, this is one where like it had some popularity. We just kind of it was just not in our wheelhouse at the time, so we missed
Yep.
it. So going back now, what works for you on Marvin the Album by Frente?
It's a very compelling vocal. I really was taken with her voice. It's delicate, it's a little breathy, but she's got a great tone. Obviously, it sounds a little young, almost cute. Uh, I think it works really well when it's accompanied with piano and guitar, especially from a melody standpoint, to where the vocal and the high part in the piano can kind of be a harmony with the vocal. A good example of that is "Girl," the first track in the record, which is an interesting way to start. Kind of brings you into, um, you know, really focus on her voice, the simplicity of just her and a piano, minor accompaniment throughout that song. You can kind of hear the range to not necessarily in she doesn't sing like super high or super low, but more in terms of like the rhythmic approach, and also she can be really effective in delivering subtly but emotionally. So in that song, the verses have these like optimistic sections, and then it goes to this chorus. It's this very kind of odd minor chord that all of a sudden, between the vocal and the piano, it takes on this more contemplative feel. So I think that song sort of sets up like, okay, these are the pieces and parts we're going to play with here. As the album moves along, I also was interested when the band got more into a straightforward kind of driving rhythm. The tones got a little bit more MIDI. The drums got a little warmer, thicker. Uh, the bass throughout is pretty consistent, but the guitars vary, and with the guitars we get a little bit more like downstrumming, a little layered. Good example would be "Most Beautiful." It got to a space for me I could start to connect with like early Cardigans, maybe even New Order a tiny bit, just the sort of melodies and things going on there. I thought that worked really well because it lets her voice float and move a lot, with the band being fairly straightforward and, filling in, not doing anything that's bombastic. It's very restrained across most of the record here. The performances are, pretty restrained. And I think that can work in that it lets her voice really just pop out and just float over top of that and move around and really be the star. No Time is another good example where, sonically it's in that space. It's got you can hear some of their folky like roots in that. It even takes a turn in the chorus. It reminded me a bit of like 60s psychedelia or like California pop.
All those awkward silences over breakfast as you fumble with your toast. Now the magic's gone for good. Little things get on your nerves. They never worried you before, and now there's no time. And now there's no time. It's not such a crime to say you don't love her. And you swore it would never happen to you.
Out of My Sight, it's a great vocal melody. I think that's one where we really listening, what she's singing there. There's a lot of movement. It's a really compelling vocal melody on that. And it's a good example of where they can use guitar. Lead guitar on that is really helping with delivering a harmony with her, vocal in that. So I think those are good examples of like the band understanding how unique of a singer she is and letting her be the star, and then, kind of putting a sonic um, framework there where, it doesn't get in the way, supports her, contrasts her a little bit, but not so much that it becomes like, I don't really want tension in this band, but it just gives it enough, I think, weight for her voice then to like, really stand out. So that's some of the stuff that I liked. How about you?
I agree with you on her voice. That's the thing that sells it for me, because it does remind me of the Cardigans, and where it's sweet, but when there's a minor chord, it sounds cool. When you get that juxtaposition of this sweet voice with this dark sounding note or chord beneath it. And it also reminded me in some instances of a sort of a dialed down Stereo Lab, where I really, I don't know how much Stereo Lab you've listened to, but Letitia Sadier, I know it's French, I'm not going to pronounce it correctly, but sometimes her voice gets into this French pop space that I really like. I'm thinking of like a song like Cuscatlan, which has this jazzy rhythm to it. It has a very staccato-ish kind of guitar riff that goes well with her vocal on top, which is nice and clean. And then I'm guessing it's the other guy in the band, but it sounds like Lin-Manuel Miranda shows up in that song. And but it's not. I know it's not Lin-Manuel Miranda. He was like 10 years old at this point. But it sounds like him, but it's the other guy. It's Simon Austin, I guess, is the guy who comes in with the middle part.
I love my country, but it wears even fall. Speaks with foreign guns. In the background, you can almost hear the sound of intervention. And I don't know when liberty fell. We rang every mission bell. We rang them loud and clearly to a world that wouldn't listen.
And I don't wanna die, I'm as innocent as anybody. I don't even know how to spell revolutionary. Jesus in the sky, the bullets in the guns. You don't even know what we mean by repression.
Blood is the color of a sunset. You walked into the darkness. I did not hear your last breath. There will not be an inquest.
I just like the vibe of that song. Like, it's got this rhythm that is not typical. And then you get songs like you mentioned. Girl is a really interesting opener. It's very stripped down. You've got a piano and vocal. And I like it because, the voice is sort of, I would guess you'd say typical, not typical. It just that the melody is like predictable. And then she throws in some like weird off kilter, like just fluctuations in her voice. It's not even that the melody goes, it's just the way she accents the way she's singing or something, that it just creates enough of a weirdness that I go, oh, that's cool. I like how she did that. There's a lot of that in her vocal. Like, some people might call it quirky, twee. Those are some of the words that would get tossed around. I just think of it as it's got personality. Like, this could be a straightforward, just a pop vocal with no sort of quirky personality, and that would be fine, but I think it would be a little less interesting. And I think that she adds that. I can understand why it might grate on some people who don't like the twee aspect of the sound, but I think you pointing out like the Cardigans thing, like Nina, what's her last name, Hagen, something like that, her vocal is so crystal clear and poppy that it works so well with that band, because that band comes up with a lot of interesting textures behind her and juxtapose her vocal with, you get Love Fool, and then you get stuff like Erase and Rewind, and like there's all sorts of like cool things that they do. And stripping it down even more, basically just acoustic guitar, occasionally some drums and bass. This does that even more, where they really just focus on her vocal as the main instrument, and then whatever they need to add, as little or as much as they need to add, they kind of build around that, which makes sense. She's got a really, it's a vocal that I wouldn't always want to listen to, but like it was a nice break, to be honest. Like, I listen to a lot of heavy music during the week. I mean, I spent a lot of time listening to King's X, which was great. I love listening to that. But then to go from King's X and then switch over to Frente and then go back was like two different worlds. So it's a nice, like, kind of palate cleanser in some ways. As soon as I heard her singing, I went, "Oh, the Bizarre Love Triangle cover!" Like, that's it. Like, clicked with me because I didn't really know what I was looking at, and I went, "Oh, that's that voice." Because I can hear that like intimate vocal of her with the acoustic guitar, on that song. I'm guessing that's Simon Austin playing guitar on that as well. In terms of production, it is so clean and clear. Like, does that work for you throughout the whole record? I'm curious what you think about the production of choices of this.
Yeah. Well, let me get into what doesn't work then. It is, I don't know that it's the cleanness of the production. I think in some spots it's fine. It works. I think it's the lack of identity, I guess. You can hear it when you like think about how the drums are produced, both from a performance and from a sound standpoint. They're all over the place. Like, I don't know what the identity of the drummer is on this record, like what they are trying to do rhythmically. It goes from being this super dry sounding cocktail kit to kind of a folky rim shot thing to super simple to very busy, a lot like triplets on the kick drum, and like to jazz and lounge. Then towards the end of the record, it starts to sound like a drum machine and loopy, like with one song has a ton of reverb on the snare that sounds like an 80s song.
One night out and much to love. One night out till you repeat yourself. One night out and much to love. One night out till you repeat yourself. Don't you remember? You came to me.
So I just lost like where are we, and that's such a huge I think when you're going to be this restrained as a band, trying to play, they don't ever get loud, there's a lot of subtlety. It's really important, like the production choices you make about, are we creating a space? We want to be in your headphones. Like, is this going to sound layers? Is it going to be like kind of echoing distant? Like, what's our production choice here? And I don't quite understand what it is on this record. And the best way for me to kind of nitpick it and figure it out is just listen to the drums from track to track and tell me, as a listener, what's going on there. Sometimes there's a handful of songs in here where I get it and it works, and then there's these left curves that I'm lost. I'm like, where are we going? Are we going back to the 80s? Is this going to turn into a jazz album? Like, what? I don't understand. And it's not a stylistic thing. It's more, it's not like a genre issue or like the song style. It's pure up like the sounds chosen, the way that they're produced and engineered from track to track. Outside of her voice, which is pretty consistent, even like going up from the drums, like the guitars, the bass is the one thing on this record I think is most consistent is the bass, other than the vocal. But even the bass, there's a couple songs where, what is it? I think it's Ordinary Angels gets into the sub bass, like double bass kind of thing, with these sub notes that sound very 90s. That's the one song where it deviates.
Ordinary people, it's okay. You don't have to wear those wings, that stupid things. I know some dizzy, easy heights. Don't stop your life at the lights. Don't be smart, be a beginner. Don't be wrong, even when it's right. Ordinary people, it's okay. We're not watching anyway. It's okay.
But other than the drums, the thing that also deviates is the guitar tones. I'm less critical of those, but there is choices here where, you know, they use acoustic guitars. Sometimes the acoustics are mic'd acoustics, and sometimes the acoustics sound like they're pickups. So it almost gives it like this open mic night feel. If you ever, you know, go to a small club and listen to somebody play acoustic, that you probably tell the difference. It's like, you know, pickup in the acoustic, which gives it a different sound. And in those situations, it's like the best you can do to have an acoustic guitar that sounds good and not like giving feedback. But for an album, it's an odd decision to make. And what song is it? Labor Love. It's, you know, it's the dominant, other than the voice, sound. And it just, it gives it this kind of chintzy feel. And I think that song could be, it produced differently, could be a huge song. Like it's got a great kind of almost novelty chorus. It's hooky. It's got a good melody. But the production of it is just, I don't know, it sounds like a demo or somebody who got recorded at open mic night. I just don't get what the production choices are there. And it just underscores like the drums and the guitars are inconsistent about like what's the sound here that we're going for. You know, is it this direct sound? Is it like a warm, you know, acoustic in a room sound? Is it a concert hall? Like, where are we? I just found that across the board to be incoherent. So that was the biggest thing for me. I can lay around like I don't like the male voice. I think the like when he comes in and it sounds like rapping, it's cringy. Does not work for me. The last song, Dangerous, they exchange vocals, and it just, to me, underscores how much better of a singer she is than he is. It makes me wonder, like, why are we doing this? Like, she's great. I don't need to hear you sing. Just go ahead and let her sing. It's not like I don't know, at least from the lyrics, I didn't get like it's some kind of like partner duet or something. That was the other thing. And that adds to the like lack of coherence about like what kind of album is this? Is this like an intimate kind of folk pop record? Is this like Bare Naked Ladies? Like we're I don't understand what we're. It's like kind of supposed to be funny or fun. It's supposed to be kind of melancholy. What's the emotion we're going for? I think it loses the script along the way that way as well. So those are my thoughts on what doesn't work. It's a lot under the big production umbrella.
Yeah, that's why
it didn't work for you.
That's why I brought it up, because like this, like with you, like Labor of Love, that guitar sounds so thin and like just kind of flat. Whereas if you listen to the acoustic guitar Most Beautiful, has a very warm
Mhm.
tone. You can hear the bass, you
Mhm.
can hear the resonance.
Human being, dumb and free, or some amazing catastrophe. Never too scared, too bad, too care, too running to the rise where the moment meets the most beautiful thing I know. And most beautiful thing, something new, I don't know why. I know all there is. I know something new, I don't know why. I know all there is. I know. La 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 da dee, yeah.
I wonder, so the 2 EPs that came out before this contain songs that are on the album, and they were recorded and released, 2 years or a year apart. I wonder if those are like, there are like multiple recording sessions on this album, and that they
Yep.
took some songs from the first EP, some songs from the second EP, and then recorded a couple other songs, and you got 3 different recording sessions for. That's just my guess.
That would make sense.
But I agree with you. Like the drums in 1.9.0 are bizarre. It's
Yeah.
like an 80s heart song.
Yeah.
Like, why is that snare so? Because it doesn't make sense in the song. Like, there's nothing in the song that makes you
Yeah.
think, oh, this. You know what this needs is a really reverbed out snare drum that's going to create this really odd sound in a completely dry environment. Like nothing else is like that. You can't mic one instrument like that and it's not going to stick out, and they don't do a lot of weird things. Like, you're basically just getting vocals, piano, guitar, bass, and drums. Like, why did you need to mic that so oddly or affected after you recorded it? Like,
It's I don't know what. Yeah, it's gated and it has a reverb. The guitar in the intro of that song has a chorus on it. It's like all of a sudden, like, boom, we just went back 5 years to 1987. Like, what happened?
There's a lot of
Where
gating.
what's going on here?
I picked up on that a lot. There's a lot of gated stuff happening where you like the stuff gets cut off way faster than a person would do it if they were playing. And that was just something, it was like a tick that I just kind of like picked up. I was like, that's weird. Why would you? Because you can hear, again, in Labor of Love, you can hear the guitar hits cut out like 1/10 of a second before you think they should. And it just gets in my head because I hear it the first time and then I just hear it every time after that.
That's an engineering decision, production decision too, where I don't know the circumstances of how they recorded this, but I could speculate, if you have a low budget studio that doesn't have a good room sound.
So
I think one way to record everything is to gate the shit out of it, and then you add reverb later.
And the thing, the production stuff that just is so weird is that her voice kind of reminds me of Zoe Deschanel. I don't know if you've heard any of the stuff that she's done with M. Ward, the She and Him stuff. They kind of take a little bit like a classic sort of approach to this. There's reverb on the vocals, and like, he tends, the songwriting tends to be sort of 60s pop influenced a lot of the time. I feel like this was the completely wrong way to go with the production on a lot of this. Like, there needed to be some warmth. You needed to have a little like room reverb happening, whereas everything sounds very dry and like on the mic, and it's so intimate that it makes the poppiness of it weird. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah.
I just again, I really like her vocal. I just wish it was produced a little bit differently. And you know what? And this is totally a nitpick that you and I, who sit here and review records, like, I'm sure the average person who maybe picked this up in 1992 was like, I don't know, that gated reverb is kind of weird. You know what I mean? Like, they might have heard something and not like processed it that way. But just like, I don't like this for some reason, and the brain is like, I don't like that one thing or this other thing. But
yeah,
like,
I think the way that they would most people would just process it as like, it just doesn't emotionally connect.
right.
And we're breaking down why that would be, right? Is because it lacks like a vibe. You know, that might be another way people would describe it. It sounds at times sterile and inconsistent in the way that like it's distracting. And I can imagine like average people being thrown by that. They might not be able to describe it in the exact same way, but they could be like, oh yeah, I like these songs or these songs, but these other songs, I don't know. I just skip them.
Yeah.
And that's part of that is like, oh, all of a sudden you just change the vibe. Like this should be a vibe record. This should be like, I put it on and I'm like, it's Sunday morning and you know what I mean? The sun's just coming up and the birds are out and like it's optimistic and a little warm and folky. Maybe there's a couple of moments that are kind of fun, but you start to feel that a little bit and all of a sudden it pulls you out of it into a totally different space. And I'm like, now I'm lost. I don't know where we're at. Like I can't get into it.
Yeah. I almost needed this to be a little weirder. Like, where's the bossa nova track? Like, her voice would fit perfectly over that. You know what I mean? Like, give me
You got some
weird
jazz. That
like,
wasn't weird enough.
Yeah, but like See Believe is like this weird free jazz thing,
Oh,
and it's
man.
like not what they should be doing.
No, that song is painful.
No, give me some Spanish guitar, you know, like flamenco style guitar, finger picked classical, and play with rhythms and stuff. I think
Yeah.
one of the things I just found was like everything's like in a bump 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 bump. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, that sort of Sesame Street rhythm. I don't. It plays too easily into what her vocal is doing. It needed. I just, and again, that's me. I need a little bit something that's a little bit more.
Well, I think what you're describing is
yeah,
the Cardigans, right?
yeah, exactly what I am.
Especially right. Especially the early Cardigans, like they would play with like genre rhythms like that, but then they would rough them up with like a distorted guitar or some weird drum sound. Like, you know, they would pull in a lot of different styles of music
Mm-hmm.
and put them all under her voice, which is a similar voice to this. It's not totally different. Worked great. And then as they evolved, you know, their sound changed some, but the early stuff was very much like in that spirit, which I could see working for this band. Great. And there's moments where you can hear it, you know. It's just inconsistent, and you get to something like See Believe, and it's like, oh my goodness, this is like beat poet.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like background music for I Married an Axe Murderer. When at the beat poet like coffee shop or whatever.
Whoa, man. Whoa,
yeah,
man.
When they're talking like in the background of a band is playing, that would be the song the band
would be it would be like just room noise.
Yeah.
So okay. Well, I knew I had feelings that we were going to get somewhere around here. We already talked about where this landed on the charts. Actually did fairly well. Especially considering 1992. This is the opposite of Nevermind, of Bad Motorfinger, of Use Your Illusions 1 and 2, Metallica's Metallica. I mean, these are the biggest records. Pearl Jam's 10.
When was Edie Brickell big? When did she have that big single?
I feel like that's before.
Because there's a song on here that sounds very close to her. Labor of Love. I thought sounded like Edie Brickell.
So the one that you know is What I Am.
Yeah.
That's the single. That album came out in 1988.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. Which, and that single came out November of 88. That was so I was thinking that was a 90s album, and it wasn't. It's a late 80s album. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians. And now I need to go watch that video because I know that video was it on MTV or VH1?
It was on MTV constantly.
Okay. Well, because I feel like in the 90s, that would have been a VH1 video. Like MTV had pivoted to like, harder rock
Yeah, yeah.
and straight up pop, and VH1 was
There was
like
some crossover stuff
a little bit.
they would do, but yeah.
This is where your John Cicadas were, your Michael Boltons, your like, I feel like Spin Doctors got played on VH1 and MTV.
Yes.
Your Spin Doctors.
Well, when was Spin Doctors? That was about around this time, wasn't it?
I want to say that,
later?
yeah, this is like 92 is when we've got the first Spin. No, 91 is when Pocket Full of Kryptonite came out.
Yeah.
They had 5 times platinum.
Really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
That went to number 1 in Australia and number 3 in the US. I've never listened to that whole record. Have you?
No.
You just know the singles. Dun 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 dun.
Yeah. That one hasn't been in a poll yet. I think we just cursed ourselves by bringing it up.
Oh, I'm gonna put it in there. I'm curious. Like, what does that sound like?
I just remember them. I mean, we're bringing it up because is it similar to this at this time? Like, I guess it had a little more of a jam band feel to my memory.
I don't know. I mean, Little Miss Can't Be Wrong is the one that everybody like rags on. Two Princes wasn't a terrible song. Just saying.
Okay.
It wasn't terrible.
I haven't heard it in so long that I wouldn't even be able to.
If I remember correctly, it has a pretty good guitar riff. But that's me, thinking back, like 3 chords was a good guitar riff. Like, ooh, it's got a C, a D, and an E.
Tricky.
I can play that. Try to figure it out on my out of tune acoustic. So where do you land, Jay? Where the album better EP, decent single? I'll share the poll results shortly.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with an EP. Girl, Most Beautiful, No Time. I only listened to accidentally Kelly Street, whatever, half dozen or more times to review this record. I was even annoyed by it, but with just that few listens. So I feel for the people of Australia that had to listen to that. It's a very annoying song. Out of My Sight and Ordinary Angels. Even that Ordinary Angels sound where it gets more into that, like, I don't know, more of a later 90s production. It sounds a little loopy and it's got some sub bass on it and stuff. Like, that's even a better sound than some of the other stuff here that is just, well, we went over it, just not working for me. Not coherent. Where'd you land?
I'm also at an EP. I would go Girl, Most Beautiful, No Time. I do like the rhythmic and her vocal in Cuscatlan, so I'm keeping that one. And then also Ordinary Angels. So what is it? I think 6 songs there.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's pretty good. I mean, I'm first couple times I was like, nope, this ain't working for me. So the fact that I warmed up to it a little bit over repeated listens.
Me too. I was like,
an EP out of
this
it.
might be a single. This might be the first single I've had in years.
Yeah. So, well, I think I had a single. When was the last Seaweed episode we did? It's been a while, I guess.
What's the last
I feel like that's probably my last single. Who knows? But that's 2 EPs for us. Now, the voting on Patreon shook out like this: 27% decent single, 18% better EP, 55% worthy album. So the majority of our patrons were the album.
Are not on the same page as us.
And it also, I mean, it won the poll and then it gets a majority worthy album. So clearly the people who pushed it,
yep,
they voted for it as well. So you got it. It's not just the primary, you also got to win the general.
Well, hopefully they feel like we gave it a fair review here.
I hope so.
We did our best.
Yes. This was a going in against Tyson at his prime. Like I'm just gonna try to do my best. I just want to survive this. But then you end up with Tyson Holyfield, not Tyson in his prime.
Right.
So
I'm missing here.
exactly. So we want to thank Eric Peterson for this suggestion and all the folks who suggested albums for this poll. You can go to digmeoutpodcast.com to suggest a record by going to the suggest an album page. You can suggest both for this podcast, our 90s rock podcast, and for our newly launched 80s metal podcast, which comes out every 2 weeks. I think we've already done like 8 episodes this year. That would make sense because we finished 4 months. And if we do 2 a month, that would be 8.
Chopping wood, man. Just getting them up there.
I did math. So you can go to digmeoutpodcast.com to suggest for both podcasts. You can also sign up for the box newsletter there. That's where the 80s metal podcast lives, and it's where we have our weekly calendar of new releases, 80s, 90s, and aughts music, books, documentaries. Speaking of, have you watched the Bon Jovi documentary on Hulu yet?
I have not.
I watched the first episode. It's 4 episodes. I watched the first one. It was very interesting. It's definitely John's perspective.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's also kind of like he's being pretty honest. Like he's struggling to like stay there vocally, and he knows it. Like he's doing all this stuff. First episode did basically like got up to Runaway.
Okay.
So
but they covered his voice in the first episode.
Yeah,
too?
because it's bouncing between the present, him talking about those things, digging through he's like looking through tapes, trying to find old. He's like, this is the first time we played, the Meadowlands, which is a crazy thing to think. Like, holy shit, they played the Meadowlands, which is 60,000 people.
Yep.
And they did it multiple times. So it's him in the present, and he's like meeting with doctors, and he's going through like regiments to help just recover from singing. It's not so much that he can't sing, it's just the recovery afterward it takes for much longer because he's older. And then he's contrasting that with him being this kid from Jersey who's in like a Bruce Springsteen and Amboy Dukes cover band, or Amboy Jukes, and then working his way up through working at the recording studio in New York City, the what's it called, the Magic Plant, the record plant, and like getting to hang out with Bowie when he's like 18 years old, because he's a studio assistant. So like Bowie's going in to record something, or the Stones go in, and he's starting to meet all these people and just like get insights on how everything in the studio works. So that he's like, I don't want to be a guy who's just a pretty face that can strum a guitar. Like, I want to understand everything about what's going on. So you're getting like into his mindset, and then introducing like Tico Torres and David Bryan and Alex John Such, and then last is the episode ends sort of with the introduction of Richie, and then like, okay, well, this is going to be the start of that sort of chapter of their relationship. And so I am curious to see like how honest they get about all that.
Related somewhat. Did you know Behind the Music is back?
No.
Yeah, I think it's on Paramount Plus.
Oh, okay.
Apparently it's the second season, and the first episode is Wolfgang Van Halen, which is potentially interesting because at least his social media post made it seem like it goes very deep on his relationship with his dad, and maybe some behind the scenes of what was going on there for the number of years he was in the band. And
so I know we're way off the rails on this conversation, but I was flipping through YouTube on our television. Katie and I sometimes do that. We watch like, analysis of songs. Like they do like a deep dive into a song, like break down like the musical structure and like kind of stuff. So we're sitting there and I see Van Halen live from the Tokyo Dome. I'm like, oh, Nina, you know that song you like, Somebody Get Me a Doctor? Like you want to see the band? And they open with Unchained, and Dave is terrible.
Yeah.
Like he can't complete lines, and he's just like woo woo, and just like, and I'm like, I'm sorry I showed this to you. I didn't realize that this was going to happen. And it's weird because you can see Wolfgang, and he's got to be like 17 or something like that. I mean, he's so young playing bass, and I'm pretty sure he recognizes what's going on. Like that Dave is just like totally a mess.
Yeah, that album was unfortunate. I mean, I think the band sounds great. It just Dave doesn't sing, so
I
it's
don't
kind of a
understand. Like, I don't understand the behavior. It's just bizarre. So anyway, not a great impression of my kid. I'm just gonna say that.
I don't think we're ever gonna understand Dave. Young Dave could pull that shit off. I think he thought he could still pull that shit off, and old Dave can't pull that off. He just needed to sing the songs, and he just refused to do it. So
weird, so weird. So that's the kind of stuff that we will let you know about on our weekly newsletter, which you can also read at Patreon. Join us, dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. Lastly, Apple Podcasts is where you go to leave positive feedback for the show. For Jay, I'm Tim. We're out, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Dig Me Out.